many a night. I walked barefoot until I was 12. I studied under street lights.
So was that the motivation behind the whole Anjani Mashelkar award?
Earth has given us enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Never forget our beginnings.
How did you drive the thinking about innovation and R&D at some of these, considering that India is supposed to be one of those low innovators?
Imitation is bad, innovation is good. So how can we innovate? Everyone is capable of sort of ideas. Our greatest strength is IT, that is Indian talent. Not information technology, but Indian talent.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of Future Unplugged. I'm your host, Sanjeev Krishan. Joining us today is none other than Dr. Ramesh Mashelkar, a visionary scientist, a transformative leader, and one of India's foremost innovators. From pioneering industrial research to driving policies that turn ideas into impact, he's been at the forefront of building India's future. His work has earned him the Padma Shri, the Padma Bhushan, and also the Padma Vibhushan. Honors that reflect his enormous contribution to science, industry, and to society. Welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mashelkar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
At the outset, your latest book, More from Less for More, it's been receiving widespread attention. I must say that I've been trying in my own organization to do more with less. So I understand why. And it's possibly about creating greater value from the least amount of resources. What I really wanted to ask you is that how did this concept evolve for you? And why do you think it's particularly relevant in the society in which we're living in today?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for giving me this privilege. It's a special honor indeed to be talking to you and joining this wonderful series that you have started. Well, to be honest, this idea came to me in my childhood. And I'll explain to you why. 17 March 2000 is an interesting day where the importance of more from less for more was proved in a way that has never been before. For example, on that day, Rashtrapati Bhavan, there were Padma Awards that were given by K.R. Narayanan, our late president. And who got it one after the other? Ratan Tata and Raghunath Mashelkar. Now you would say, how does it prove MLM? Because fundamentally, MLM, more from less for more, gives you access equality despite income inequality. Now, both K.R. Narayanan and myself had access equality to education, despite being very, very poor. For example, K.R. Narayanan was so poor that he used to walk to the school several kilometers. His parents were so poor that they could not afford tuition fee, and he would stand outside the class and take notes and so on. And the magic happened when he got a Tata scholarship and he got access to education and higher education. I was myself born in a very poor family in a village called Mashel. My father died when I was 6. And my mother was illiterate, brought me to Mumbai in search of a job. 2 meals a day was a challenge. I've gone hungry many a night. I walked barefoot until I was 12. I studied under street lights. And a break came when I stood 11th among 135,000 students in secondary school certificate exam. And the break came when I got Tata's scholarship and access to education and higher education. Now you can just imagine a Tata scholar becoming a president and honoring another Tata scholar and Ratan Tata himself. All right? That proves you the power of access equality despite income inequality. So in a small way, it started there. And as I grew, I saw this India and this Bharat. India was flying, and Bharat, in villages, under what conditions they are. And the basic challenge is the challenge of inequalities will create social disharmony. And therefore, how do you actually create innovation-led growth, but innovation-led inclusive growth?
Yeah.
And for innovation-led inclusive growth, you require inclusive innovation, which will include all. That's the first point. The second point is the current innovation is more from more for less and less people. What do I mean by that? iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 17, they keep on becoming more and more expensive, and less people can have it.
Right.
That is more from more for less and less people. What we require is more from less for more people. And actually speaking, I would say that in 2008, I formalized this entire, let's say, framework when I was honored by the Australian Academy. And I was the first Indian to be honored with a fellowship. So I said, they don't know enough about India. Otherwise, I could have given a list of 100 people who are better than me. So the title of my talk was From Gandhi to Gandhian Engineering, More from Less for More. Why did I say that? You'll remember, Sanjeev, that Mahatma Gandhi had said, Earth has given us enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. What did that mean? That means use the exhaustible resources less and less to create more and more of it, so that more and more generations, the first, second, third, fourth generation will have it. That is more from less for more. All right? So there is an embedded principle of access equality despite income equality. There is an embedded principle of making high technology work for the poor, not less from less, more from less. And there is this idea of affordable excellence, which is contradiction in terms. Why I'm saying that? You may be a villager, but you will still have an aspiration. And you want the same quality of life. All right? That's why less from less will not do. Jugaad will not do. More from less. That is the basis.
Right, right. So, sir, I'm almost, listening to you, I'm almost inclined to ask you this question. Do you think that, because a lot of it is about purpose also, and many of us would say that we do things for a purpose, yet it may be that we are living with paradoxes, because on the one hand, we want more inclusive growth. At the same time, we know that the distribution of wealth has become even more disproportionate than it was many years back. So it is paradoxical that we all say that we have a purpose, we want to cause inclusiveness, but unfortunately, the society is getting less inclusive in some ways. So how do we explain this paradox?
See, this is the issue really. You can't get income equality. It will take decades. You know how much time India took for moving from $100 GDP per capita to 2000. We don't have that time, so as to say. But can you give them access equality despite income inequality? That is basically the issue.
Got it.
I'll give you an example of this on what difference it can make. If I may have this FX healthcare bag, let me explain to you the concrete example. Now, what is this? This is FX.
Yeah.
FX is affordable excellence. It's a healthcare kit. What does it comprise? It comprises equipment which actually follows the principle of more from less for more. For example, you want to measure your sugar. Normally you take blood, send it for sample and all that. Here we have a device where you just put your finger and you know what it is. Hemoglobin, once again the same thing. You put your finger and you know what it is. So I created this Anjani Mashelkar Foundation actually, which actually promotes this high technology working for the poor, promotes access equality despite income inequality. This entire kit basically can do 20 tests, whether it is blood sugar, hemoglobin, BP, blood pressure, and so on and so forth. They're all non-invasive, so as to say. Okay?
Right.
Now remember the number 20, 10, 100.
Yeah.
20 tests, medical tests of medical grade can be done in less than 10 minutes for just 100 rupees.
Right.
$1.
Right.
Okay. Now you can just imagine, just take a specific case. For example, cancer. Okay. Breast cancer, because it is detected late, 90% of the deaths take place. Supposing we detect it early, what is the challenge for a woman in a village? Well, mammography is the best practice, but mammography is painful, expensive, requires radiation, not available in villages. Now, here is something called iBreast, which has been designed, which is non-invasive. You just move it around the breast and you know whether you have cancer or not. This is now, Lancet has ranked it as the best non-invasive device. It is used in more than 20 countries now. Goa itself has screened 2 lakh women, for example, in the last 3 years. And because it is painless, you can just see the benefit that you have. And this is all done in $1. So the point is, income inequalities, they will take time.
Yeah.
But if you give access equality to education, to health and so on and so forth, you build your future.
Right.
That's what we look at.
So was that the motivation behind the whole Anjani Mashelkar awards that you?
Yes, it's a very interesting story. I'm glad you asked me. You know, I used to be the Director General of CSIR. And I used to work from Delhi, you know, managing 40 labs. But I never left my research. I would always come back during the weekend and be in my lab. So when I came on Friday evening and would go back to Delhi on Sunday evening, and I have this habit of carrying cash all the time.
Right.
So I would give it to my mother, you know. We never asked her what she did with it. When she passed away, 17 November 2006, I remember, my daughter Shruti was organizing her sort of saris and the rest of it, all her belongings, and she found all that money there. And there she had left a chit in Marathi, but I'll translate it in English. She said, never forget our beginnings and help those who do science for the poor.
Right.
That is where this entire idea of Anjani Mashelkar Foundation came up.
Wonderful, wonderful. You also in the book have highlighted, you know, some other cases where they can actually be more from less for more. But the question there is that can these sandboxes, if I may call it so, or playbooks really cause, you know, scale to happen, or are these going to be experiments?
No, they are huge scales, as I already know. For example, if you look at a mobile phone today, you can see a woman in a Mercedes having a mobile and a woman who is sweeping the streets having a mobile. That is access equality.
Right.
The entire digital transformation that has actually taken place, and that has happened at a scale.
Right.
For example, Reliance alone has 500 million customers,
Yeah.
so as to say.
Yeah.
And you know the change that India has had. So therefore, when you look at doing more from less for more, I give you examples of all these startups, 14 of them who have created these. Now these startups have a mindset of not chasing valuations, but chasing values. Not wanting to become billionaires, but bringing smile on the face of billions. So they are exception. But then what about the corporate world? I would put it this way. In fact, after I gave that particular talk in Australia, More from Less for More, C.K. Prahlad and I wrote a paper in Harvard Business Review. Okay? And its title was More from Less for More, Innovation's Holy Grail. As a matter of fact, because it's very difficult to achieve. And we said, what does it mean for the business? So the basic principle was simple, Sanjeev. What do businesses do? They do well, make a lot of money, and they say, what did I do for the poor? And then they create a foundation and a trust. Like Bill Gates, made a lot of money and then said Bill Gates Foundation, and they are doing a great job.
Yeah.
So it is doing well and doing good. Our thesis is doing well by doing good.
Right. Got it.
That affordable mobile phone of $12, for example, with 4G LTE,
Yeah.
okay? Today, with $12, a villager can do everything that he wants, getting access to internet, watching IPL or transferring money and so on and so forth. And that is being done on hundreds of millions of...
And the scale is creating value anyways.
Yes, yeah. So our basic principle was that can business start looking at things in a different way?
Got it.
Rather than old business and looking for new money, why don't we change the character of the business itself? Because what we are doing is that currently we have a pie and we are trying to cut each other to basically get more share of the pie.
Yeah.
Why don't you increase the size of the pie by those who have been underserved and bringing them in, like is the case with mobile. And for that, your basic thinking has to change. You're not looking for huge margins, but large volumes, so as to say.
Yeah.
And so scale is very, very important because affordability and scalability, they go together. You do not scale otherwise.
Got it. You actually might have answered my next question already, sir, because I was going to ask you that, you played such a significant role and you've chaired innovation boards at many of the Indian multinationals now, I must say. And my question was that, how did you drive the thinking about innovation and R&D at some of these, considering that India is supposed to be one of those low innovators? But is there something else that you'd like to add?
Yeah. For instance, for Reliance, I chaired the Reliance Innovation Council, which had Nobel laureate John Maryland, Nobel laureate Bob Grubbs, C.K. Prahlad, and great people like that. And we were always looking at not the best practice, but the next practice, so as to say. Because when you say, I'm doing the best practice, you're copying somebody's, following. I want India to be leader, basically. So that was the first culture. Secondly was the democratization of innovation that we did, for example, in Reliance. Because when 2008 happened, as you know, the entire economic crisis that we had, we actually wanted to get the entire organization involved, not just top down, so as to say, okay? So we said extreme efficiency, value maximization, and war on waste are the three principles where people's ideas are very welcome. So it was like a co-creation, so as to say. And we called it Mission Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra is the battle between the bad and the good.
Right.
Imitation is bad, innovation is good. So how can we innovate? And we have this fundamental belief that everyone is someone, and minds on the margin are not marginal minds. Everyone is capable of sort of ideas. And the kind of benefits that we received from that were incredible. And also there was a cultural shift, basically, that we brought out. For example, the awards were named after the characters from Mahabharata, like Dharma, Arjun, Karna. Karna was Danashur. He was gracious. So if supposing somebody from sales and marketing gives an idea in manufacturing and it works, he's not thinking of himself, he's thinking of others. The character change? So like that, yeah. And similarly, we created a program called Beyonders, the pole vaulting.
Right.
Selecting some 20-25 pole vaulting leaders with a kind of different mindset. Will not be constrained by constraints, but we'll look at them as an opportunity and so on and so forth. Programs like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something interesting about Tatas, for example. Once Ratan had invited me, I think it was the year 2005 or 6, in Goa, when he had the meeting of the executives and so on. And he wanted me to talk about innovation as a way of life. Okay. So I talked about innovation as a way of life and talked about risk-taking being a very major consideration. And I said, a friend of mine had come from US and in a conversation, he said, we don't hang people who make mistakes, but we hang people who don't take risks. What do you do in India? I said, obviously, we hang the people who take risks. And there was a big laughter. There is one person who did not laugh, Sanjeev, and that was Ratan.
Oh, right.
So during coffee, he said, Dr. Mashelkar, what you said is right. How do we make Tata's take risk, as a whole? So I said something simple, celebrate those who dare to try but failed. That became the Daring to Try program, where you think of an out-of-the-box idea, where chance of success may be small, but organization will back you up. In fact, I remember I was the chairman of the jury for the first sort of this thing, and this is the most sought after program today. But what it did, Sanjeev, was a cultural change.
Right.
For example, there was an exhibition that was held in Pune by Tata Motors, where there were 3 stalls. The first stall was that, yes, we did it. That means we had a hoary goal and we achieved it. The second was, yes, we are at it. That means they had set up some tall goal and were working on it. And the third was, we tried, but. Failure was being displayed proudly. Why? Because they had sort of tried.
Yeah.
That's a cultural shift, so as to say. That is the most popular program. I can go on giving some other examples, but basically, fundamentally, it was not about only the CEO or the managing director or the chairman changing his mindset. It is about the entire organization making a cultural shift. Culture matters. That is the most important.
It's a movement. Yeah, I think that's so well put. And yeah, we've been risk averse for far too long, and obviously that inhibits the kind of the innovation and stuff like that we'd like India to be participating in. But sir, if we were to move forward and think about the future now, and today Indian balance sheets are a lot healthier. India seems to be in a great position. So we talk about 2030 and 2047. We talked about Viksit Bharat, and we say 2030 is always looked upon as an inflection point in the 2047 journey, if I may call it so. How do you look at India from a futuristic standpoint at this point in time, and why is it that 2030 is so important to us as a vantage point?
Yes, this is a very interesting decade, by the way. There is no doubt about that. As a matter of fact, we know that 2025 was a tough year for a variety of reasons which are not under our control. Yeah. You know what I mean. But despite that, our basic strengths remain. Our greatest strength is IT, that is Indian talent. Not information technology, but Indian talent. Atalji used to say IT is India's greatest advantage, IT as in information technology. I used to say Indian talent.
Right.
So I think my first answer to this is this power of Indian talent, the youth, the young, and their ability to deliver the highest intellectual capital per dollar. I think because in a knowledge economy, that's what is going to sort of matter. And then to back them up, now we have this digital public infrastructure, which is one of the best in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see the impact of that. When the startup India movement was started, as a matter of fact, and 2016 we had 1 unicorn per year.
Yeah.
By 2021 we had 1 unicorn per week.
Yeah.
44, not 52, but 1 unicorn per week. And 1/3 of them came from Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. Yes. Why? Because there was an access. And we have seen already the power of the digital sort of infrastructure. So that, backed up by talent, I think are a great sort of opportunities for us. And the third is something that we are able to create affordable excellence. Because as long as it is excellence of global quality, the word is our oyster, so as to say. And if it is affordable, you are serving a dual purpose, affordable serving the developing world and the excellence serving the developed world. I would say that these three are at the center of our growth during this period. And the resilience. We have demonstrated resilience, for example, during COVID. And we do know that today we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, but India has still stood tall.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I have a question on Indian talent, and I'll come to it just in a minute. But since you mentioned, you gave some anecdotes, will you like to share the anecdote about Haldi Ghati and your... I'm sure it will be lovely for viewers to listen to.
Yes, I think that's interesting. There again, I have to give credit to my mother. Maybe we will say that, you know what had happened, a little story. I'm sorry, I'll take a minute on that. My wife and my mother and Ame, my son, were sitting in a hot sunny day, hot summer day, and a bird came and fell and his wing was broken. And I remember my mother ran down and brought haldi and applied the paste. And the bird died in a couple of hours and we all cried. During dinner, I asked her, how did you know that something that works for a human will work for a bird? She was illiterate, but she was wise, wisdom. She said, all living, whether it's a tree or a fish or a bird or an animal or a human, they are the same. That had stuck in my mind. Then I was sitting, after I became DG, reading Times of India in the morning, and I suddenly saw that the wound healing properties of turmeric, there was a patent taken by the US. I said, come on, my mother knew it, my mother's mother knew it. How come? Because for a patent you require novelty, non-obviousness and utility. Where is the novelty? So in the evening, I was giving Hussain Zahir Memorial Oration. It was a public lecture, and I announced that I'm going to fight it.
Right.
Now, I did something wrong. You know why? As Director General of CSIR, I had all the freedom in the world. But as Secretary to Government of India, all that freedom was taken away. Because unless the minister had said yes, I could not have made a public announcement. But they stood behind me. And in 14 months, that patent was cancelled. But that also, I think God was smiling. He gave me an opportunity. There is this word, Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, in Geneva, with 176 nations. So I was appointed the chairman of the Standing Committee on Information Technology for 2.5 years. And at that time, this Haldi patent was revoked. And they did not look at traditional knowledge as knowledge at all, by the way. Okay?
Right.
They didn't recognize it. So I said, knowledge generated in Stanford, Caltech, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge is knowledge. And knowledge generated by my predecessors by working in laboratories of life over centuries, no knowledge, that's not acceptable. So I said, we must look at the international patent classification again. Okay? And we had a 5-nation committee, India, China, Europe, and so on and so forth. And that international patent classification was changed to include traditional knowledge in that. Right. But Sanjeev, the problem was not over there. I made friends with the US Patent Office, who were one of them, and told them that I went actually, I visited their patent office and showed to them, I said turmeric was only one patent, there are hundreds of wrong patents. So I took 10 of them, got the original Sanskrit shlokas where that innovation was described, converted into English and showed to them, this is what you thought as novel, this is what my predecessors have done, and like that one after the other. Yeah. Then Sanjeev, they took me to the way they do the search. They showed, we put turmeric, wound healing powder, nothing came on the screen. Because that knowledge was either up here in your sort of heads or in old textbook. We don't have access. So I came back and created traditional knowledge digital libraries, where all that knowledge was captured, and 30 million pages of that was created, but in a language of international patent classification, because that language they must understand. So what is the net effect now? Net effect is, I remember when Dr. Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister, went to meet Obama the earlier day, there's an agreement signed between US Patent Office and our Patent Office that anytime anything on traditional knowledge is applied for, they will look at TKDL, Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. And now we have agreements with 17 countries. Right. So that little bird, now you can see the entire traditional knowledge has been sort of accepted by sort of everyone. So turmeric might appear like a small story, but it makes such a difference.
That incident, we are all in gratitude to that incident to have happened, Otherwise, much of our traditional things would have been lost.
Yeah, but that is true. But it is not, Sanjeev, all about protecting. Because in laboratories of life, based on the experiential learnings, they have created so much. So now that we have completed 25 years, I actually told them that just don't keep on protecting. We have tools like artificial intelligence now.
Yeah.
Start combining them. And who knows, you will get clues for new molecules, new therapies, this, that. And that work is going on now.
Right.
Because it's a treasure house, so as to say.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So on that one, since you mentioned AI, I was going to get to that only, and you mentioned Indian talent. One of the questions, sir, which is in my mind is that if you look at India's competitive advantage, and we talked about GCCs also, it's been a good journey so far. But do you believe that we need to do something with our education system today to make sure that the demographic profile, the STEM students that come out of Indian colleges and universities are ready for this AI age where the disruption is of a very high magnitude and the expectations of corporates and society alike from them are going to be of a different magnitude?
Absolutely. In fact, I have a paper which is Industry 4.0, Exponential Technology and Jobs in India. How do we make ourselves future ready is going to be a sort of a big challenge. And exponential technologies are going to play a big role. For example, AI itself will change the entire educational sort of a system, so as to say. Some people have gone to an extent to say that there will be schools will be just for social interactions and learnings will be by AI. Maybe that's an extreme, but we have to realize that this is going to be a phygital world.
Right.
Neither digital nor entirely physical, but phygital. And how do we combine that? That is going to be the most important. That's first point. The second point is there is what is called right to education, and right way of education. There are three different things. Right way of learning. Now, right to education has been given, so that's not an issue. But right education, not only those which can create jobs, but which can create entrepreneurs, who will create jobs. And also because new exponential technologies are going to take away jobs.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Like AI, you already see the laydowns that are happening, but they will create new jobs. Each time new technology has come, there have been sort of new jobs that have been created. In fact, in that paper, I have given a list of old jobs which will vanish and new jobs that will come. But it requires sort of complete planning right now. And also future-ready teachers, so as to say. That is our greatest challenge. In fact, the children will be ahead of our teachers. I'll give you a little story. For example, during COVID time, I remember my friend Uday Gujar brought his grandson, 8-year-old. Okay? And he said, we have a problem with this child. I said, what is the problem? He said, he knows everything. I said, how can that be a problem? So he said, sit down. What is your favorite subject? He said, all subjects. Very confident boy. So since it was COVID time, I said, we will pick up biology. I said, what is the difference between bacteria and virus? 10 out of 10. Perfect. Then I raised the bar. I said, what is mutation? Perfect answer. Then I raised the bar. I said, what is spike protein? Not 10 out of 10, but 8 out of 10. Then we went into DNA and all that. And I had the photograph of mine with Watson, James Watson, the Nobel laureate. We were having a breakfast. I said, who is he? He couldn't recognize him. So I said, James Watson. Tuck, James Watson and Crick, Nobel Prize for finding the structure of DNA, etc. Immediately, so I said, you know so much about Nobel Prize. Who is the scientist who has got 2 Nobel Prizes? Immediately, Madame Curie, which year? And I said, no. Linus Pauling also had 2. No, sir. You asked me about science. Okay? His first was science, second was peace. So I got shocked. I asked his father, how come? You know what he said? All that we did was to trust him and give him Google. Google was his guru. Now, Sanjeev, here is a problem. This young boy, if he goes to school and his teacher is still doing chalk and talk. There is a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is a challenge of India and Bharat. In the same week, Sanjay,
Yeah.
I read a sad headline, a 15-year-old girl from a village near Satara committing suicide. Why? She could not give online exam. Why? Because her poor parents could not afford mobile or a tablet. Okay? Just few kilometers away, India and Bharat.
Yeah.
That's why I'm bothered about these inequalities.
Yeah.
Okay? Access.
Yeah. So, sir, I mean, AI, it could be unnerving for many, right? And earlier in the discussion, we spoke about inclusivity. How can AI leverage our ambition of Viksit Bharat, which means that it has to go down to the grassroots level? So we recently put some thoughts out together, and really it was to say that businesses, government, and civil society ought to work together to scale some of the experiments which have been done, because everybody has a different role in advocating, in mentoring, and in providing at some level. But do you think that we need another framework to make sure that AI really enables the grassroots development?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question. As a matter of fact, I have been also thinking about it and involved with some of the experiments. In fact, I chair also the committee on ethics in AI that have been recently sort of committed. I think the major challenge with India is going to be, one, we have to go for voice, and second, local languages.
Yeah.
If you have the combination of the two, inclusion will happen very fast. And of course, the affordability, which actually follows. And that will lead to scalability. I'm already seeing experiments being done on that. The issue is that of scaling it.
Right.
I already give the example of cough into a phone and TB.
Yeah.
Okay, and what a dramatic difference is. Women in villages become pregnant, let us say. They have to change 3 buses to go to the medical center. They are not well looked after. So Senthil, who used to work for Google at a time, he left his job and has created a wearable that a pregnant woman can use, along with assisted by a particular device. 7 of the parameters are actually measured remotely. And again, it's AI powered. So in the first trimester itself, you know whether pregnancy is going to be safe. Even nutrition levels are measured. And very proud to say that this was Anjani Mashelkar awardee, but it has also become a Harvard Business School case study in terms of how AI can be used. And one can I have some other winners also who are using AI to an effect. So we have demonstrated, as a matter of fact, that you can reach affordable excellence and access equality by using AI. We need to multiply this.
Wonderful, sir. So I do believe that India can be a leader in inclusive AI if we can do some of the things that you said right. On that note, sir, just a few questions more about really how do we, embrace this at scale, and how do we create leadership in various facets. But I don't think any better way to start the question than asking you your own journey at CSIR, which was really a national laboratory. And you actually converted it into an international one. And businesses like GE and other really leveraged them. Is there a story there which generations ahead should learn from?
I think it has to do with the following. Normally I talk about 5 Mashelkar mantras, and one of them is, there is no limit to human achievement, no limit to human endurance, no limit to human ideas, accepting the limits you put on yourself. Yeah. So, National Chemical Laboratory, as I mentioned, was a laboratory which was doing import substitution, copying, reverse engineering, which is a better word. But the same people, given a challenge, as a matter of fact, went ahead of a leader in that particular field and created sort of intellectual property. So I think that self-confidence is extraordinarily sort of important.
Yeah.
The second is aspirations are our possibilities, and we have to keep them high. Actually, that is where it all begins. Like young Gukesh at the age of 8, he said, "I'm going to be the youngest world champion," and he became.
Yeah.
Basically. Third is you can do anything but not everything. Therefore, focus. Somehow or the other we miss that. So as to say, with wrong decision. The other thing is that self-confidence that you can keep on knocking on the doors, they don't open. You create your own doors.
Yeah.
I think if we do that, magic will happen.
Wow. Wow. So well said. So powerful as well. I have to ask you, sir, I mean, there's a lot of learning and, you mentioned your own example. Do you think at times to move forward, I mean, we all say that we don't know everything and, we are willing to learn, etc. But at times, do you think in leadership, we also have to unlearn something to learn something else?
Oh yeah, there is no question about that. I think very first challenge we have is inability to take risks.
Yeah.
I think that mindset we have to change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secondly, there is a lot of I in India.
Oh yeah.
We must replace it with we, basically, because at the end it is the team that actually delivers. Trust we already talked about, so as to say, And as I said, everyone is someone, minds on the margin are not marginal minds. And therefore, how do you get the best out of everyone? To get ordinary things from ordinary people is very easy. Extraordinary thing from extraordinary people is very easy. Getting extraordinary thing from ordinary people, I think, is very difficult. So somehow or the other, we are very class conscious. ये तो class 4 employee है, ये क्या सोच सकता है? That's mindset we have to do away with. And we have experimented and we have found, as a matter of fact, that can change. And finally, yes, we can. In fact, I remember, I'm sorry to be coming back to my own stories again and again, but I must tell you that in NCL, I had the reputation of being a why not director. Why not, in a sense, if you come to me with a new idea, I would say, why not? Even though we had not done it before. Just to give an example, Hirwani was the first management graduate we hired, because for NCL, I created for the first time a business development school, sort of center. Okay? And I remember he came to me and he said, "Sir, there is a World Bank project on reforming Chinese institutions, chemical research institutions in Nanjing and Suzhou. Should we bid for it?" We had never done it. I said, "Yes, we'll bid for it." Now I'll tell you, they were difficult times because 1989 means pre-liberalization, no foreign exchange. So we begged, borrowed. I remember Ranganathan was the ambassador there, and you required a translator, Chinese to English, English to Chinese. We got the commercial attaché. In a 5-star hotel, we had to book a room. We didn't have the money. A friend of mine helped that and so on. And can you believe it? We beat Arthur D. Little, KM Systems, international development planners, and won that contract.
Oh, wow.
All right. That was the first time. Later on, Mr. Ranganathan told us this is the first time China had given a consultancy contract to India. Why? Simply because we said, why not?
Yeah.
We have the challenge of why. We ask 5 questions, bulk of the time, whenever there is a new idea that comes. Okay, never done it before. Does it mean it cannot be done now? Let me play devil's advocate, etc., etc. There are some 5 things we say, sounds too difficult, and so on and so forth. That mindset that yes, we can, I think that is the most important part.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's so powerful. But I will have to end with a very stereotypical question. So your journey itself has been so captivating. I mean, just listening to you just now, You have had the opportunity to spend so much time with business leaders, scientific leaders, and so on and so forth. In your mind, sir, what do responsibility and legacy mean for leadership of this generation, and for them when they think about, the future generations that they possibly will, hand over to?
Yes, I think it's an extremely important question. I think because we are talking about Vikasit Bharat by 47. Frankly speaking, I don't know why we have to wait until that time, honestly. Okay, that's number one. I think we should do it much earlier. That's the first part. But the second part is that when we build it, there has to be certain characteristics to that India. It has to be a Santulit Bharat, in a sense balanced. We are talking about castes today. My dream is a casteless society. We are talking about castes, and it has to be well governed, so Sushasit. It has to be Sushikshit, where education is different. Suvidya, educated, but also sort of enlightened. Samruddha, like I said. And also Swanandi, happy, because there is no substitute to that.
Right.
But most importantly, the responsibility is on the current leadership.
Yeah.
I'm talking about future leader. And there again, let me be little anecdotal. I've been on the board of Hindustan Lever, as you know. And when Dr. Ashok Ganguly was on the board of Unilever, as well as heading their research, technology, etc., I remember I had taken over as a Director General of CSR. Okay. And after taking over on 1st July, within 2 weeks I was in London for Royal Society Unilever a symposium on complex fluids. I was giving the opening keynote. As soon as Ashok met me, he said, "Congratulations, Ramesh. Have you found your successor?" I said, "Be kind to me. I've just taken over 2 weeks ago." He said, "No, I'm telling you about how you will be judged. Not by what you have done, but what leader do you have? You have chosen, as a matter of fact. Because temporary flash of a leader, who is charming or this, that, etc., lasts for a little while. You will be judged by your sort of a successor."
Yeah.
I think we have to choose leaders, second generation, third generation, right now, as a matter of fact, and that should start from school level, according to me, spotting them and then nurturing them, etc. I think if that happens, then why Vikasit Bharat 2047? It can happen much earlier.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Such an enriching conversation, sir. It's really been lovely conversing with you. I'm quite hopeful. I mean, I've learned a lot. I'm sure, audience will feel lot inspired by not just your journey and the anecdotes that you shared, but also about how India is coming of age and what it can achieve. I mean, it's all latent. India can achieve a lot. And yes, 2047, why 2047? Maybe 2037 or something.
Absolutely.
Like that. So on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Future Unplugged. Dr. Mashelkar, thank you for sharing your journey, your insights, and your unwavering belief in innovation with purpose. Your work reminds us that true progress is measured not just by growth, but by inclusion and impact. To everyone listening, thank you for joining, and stay tuned for more conversations with leaders shaping what comes next. Until next time.